Does it ever feel like the world is being pulled in two opposite directions at the same time? On one hand, we are living in an age of almost unimaginable technological and scientific progress. On the other hand, our world feels more divided, more angry, and more chaotic than at any time in recent memory. How can both of these things be true at once? How can an age of incredible progress also be an age of furious backlash? In his brilliant and timely book, Age of Revolutions, Progress and Backlash from 1600 to the Present, the political thinker and historian Fareed Zakaria argues that this is not a new or unique phenomenon. In fact, he suggests, this tension is the central driving engine of the entire modern era. For the last 400 years, he argues, history has moved in a predictable, repeating cycle. A powerful revolution, whether it's technological, political, or cultural, creates rapid and disorienting progress. And that progress inevitably triggers a powerful, emotional, and often violent backlash from those who feel threatened, displaced, or left behind by the change. This is not just a history book. It is a philosophical roadmap. It is a guide to the secret rhythm of our times. A mental model that, once you see it, will change how you understand the news, our politics, and the very world we are living in today. To understand this repeating pattern, Zakaria takes us back to its beginning, not to the famous revolutions of America or France, but to a small, soggy, and seemingly insignificant country in the 1600s, the Dutch Republic. It was here, he argues, that the first truly modern revolution took place, a revolution that invented many of the features of the world we now take for granted. While the rest of Europe was dominated by powerful monarchies and a rigid dogmatic Catholic Church, the Netherlands was different. It was a decentralized republic of merchants and traders, and in this unique environment, a new and powerful set of ideas took root. They championed a form of capitalism based on free trade and global commerce, creating the world's first multinational corporations and stock market. They pioneered a revolutionary degree of religious tolerance, welcoming refugees like the philosopher Spinoza and the pilgrims who would later sail to America. And they cultivated a culture of liberalism, a belief in individual rights, property rights, and a government that served the people, not the other way around. The result was a stunning explosion of wealth, innovation, and artistic genius known as the Dutch Golden Age. This tiny country became the richest and most powerful nation in Europe. This was the first great liberal revolution. But, as Zakaria points out, it also produced the first modern backlash. The traditional, aristocratic, and monarchical powers of Europe, like Spain and France, looked at this new, modern bourgeois society with a mixture of envy and disgust. They saw it as a threat to their own traditional, hierarchical way of life, and they launched a series of brutal wars in an attempt to crush it. Here, for the first time, we see the pattern emerge, a great leap forward in progress followed by a powerful reactionary backlash. The next great case study in this historical rhythm is the one that defined the very idea of revolution for all time, the French Revolution of 1789. If the Dutch Revolution was a slow economic evolution, the French Revolution was a sudden, violent, and political earthquake that shattered the old world forever. The ideals of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, were some of the most powerful and hopeful ideas ever unleashed into the world. They were a direct assault on the entire ancient regime of kings, of priests, and of aristocrats. The revolution declared that sovereignty did not belong to a king who ruled by divine right, it belonged to the people. It was a radical, thrilling, and world-changing idea. But the revolution quickly revealed the dark side of rapid utopian change. The initial idealistic phase descended into the bloody paranoia of the Terror, a period where thousands were executed by the guillotine in the name of revolutionary purity. The attempt to completely erase the past, to destroy all old institutions and traditions, led not to a stable republic, but to chaos, to civil war, and ultimately to the rise of a new kind of tyrant, Napoleon Bonaparte. The French Revolution, Zakaria argues, is the ultimate example of the revolution backlash dynamic. The explosive force of its progressive ideals created an equally powerful and terrified conservative backlash, not just in France but all across Europe. For the next century, European politics would be defined by the struggle between the forces of liberal revolution and the forces of conservative reaction. The revolution showed that even the most noble and well-intentioned ideas, if pushed too far, too fast, can create a backlash that threatens to consume the revolution itself. The most transformative revolution of all, however, was not political. It was technological and economic. The Industrial Revolution, which began in Britain in the late 18th century and spread across the world, was the single greatest change in the material conditions of human life since the Agricultural Revolution. The progress it unleashed was staggering. For the first time in history, humanity broke free from the age-old cycle of poverty and famine. Economic growth exploded. New technologies, from the steam engine to the telegraph, completely remade the world. It created a new prosperous middle class and generated a level of wealth that was previously unimaginable. But this incredible progress came at a terrible price, and it produced the most powerful and violent backlashes in human history. The Industrial Revolution ripped people from their traditional rural ways of life and threw them into the new, crowded, and often horrific conditions of the industrial cities. It created a new class of urban poor who worked grueling hours in dangerous factories for subsistence wages. And it created a level of economic inequality that the world had never seen before. This social and economic dislocation, Zakaria argues, was the fertile soil in which the great toxic ideologies of the 20th century grew. Communism was a direct backlash against the perceived injustices and inequalities of industrial capitalism. It was a promise to the suffering working class that a new, more just world was possible. Fascism and Nazism were a different kind of backlash. They were a reaction against the chaos, the individualism, and the cosmopolitanism of the modern liberal world. They were a promise to restore a sense of national pride, of organic community, and of traditional hierarchical order. Both of these ideologies, in their own ways, were a furious backlash against the dislocations of the Industrial Revolution. And they would go on to produce the most catastrophic wars and the most murderous regimes in the history of humankind. The story of the 20th century in this telling is the story of the world grappling with the violent ideological backlash to the great disruptive progress of the 19th century. The revolution we are living in, globalization and the digital age. This brings us to our own time. Zakaria argues that since the end of the Cold War, we have been living through another one of these great transformative revolutions. This is the revolution of globalization and the digital age. The progress created by this revolution has been, by any historical measure, astonishing. The opening of the global economy has lifted over 1 billion people out of extreme poverty in the last 30 years, the greatest and fastest reduction in poverty in human history. The digital revolution, powered by the internet and the smartphone, has connected humanity in ways that were previously unimaginable. We have more access to information, to culture, and to each other than any generation that has ever lived. But, as the historical pattern would predict, this incredible, rapid, and disorienting progress has created its own powerful and angry backlash. The same forces of globalization that created immense new wealth also hollowed out the industrial heartlands of the Western world, leaving behind a trail of unemployment and despair. The same digital revolution that connected us also disrupted entire industries and created a new, winner-take-all economy where a few tech giants hold unprecedented power. And so, in the 2010s, the backlash arrived right on schedule. It came in the form of a new wave of populism, of nationalism, and of a deep, angry resentment towards the global elites who were seen as the winners of this new age. It was Brexit in the United Kingdom. It was the rise of populist leaders all across Europe. And it was the political earthquake of Donald Trump in the United States. Zakaria is clear. This backlash is not just about economics. It is also a cultural backlash. It is a reaction against the rapid social changes that have come with globalization, the rise of multiculturalism, the changing social norms around race and gender, the decline of traditional religious authority. For many people, this new, liberal, cosmopolitan world feels alien and threatening. The populist backlash is a cry of defiance from those who feel that their country, their culture, and their very identity is being taken away from them. The philosophy of the backlash. So why does this pattern keep happening? Why does every great leap of progress seem to produce an equal and opposite reaction? The final part of Zakaria's book is a deep philosophical inquiry into the psychology of the backlash. He argues that we, the proponents of liberal progressive change, often have a blind spot. We focus on the aggregate benefits of a revolution. We can point to the charts that show how globalization has increased global GDP or how technology has made our lives more efficient. But we often fail to see and to empathize with the very real human cost of that disruption for the people who are on the losing end of it. Revolutions are, by their very nature, destabilizing. They destroy old jobs and old ways of life. They upend traditional social hierarchies. They challenge deeply held beliefs about the world. For the people who were comfortable in the old order, this change is not experienced as progress. It is experienced as a threat, as a loss, as a form of cultural and economic violence. The backlash is not primarily a logical or an economic response. It is an emotional one. It is a politics of identity. It is rooted in a deep human need for community, for stability, and for a sense of dignity and respect. When people feel that their way of life and their sense of who they are is being dismissed and looked down upon by a new, educated urban elite, they will predictably react with anger. The great and often tragic lesson of the last 400 years is that progress is never a simple, straight line forward. It is a messy, difficult, and a contested process. It is a constant negotiation between the forces of change and the forces of tradition, between the desire for a new and better future and the deep human need for a stable and familiar present. Zakaria's final message is one of cautious and wise optimism. He is a firm believer in the power of liberal, democratic, and capitalist societies to create progress, but his book is a powerful and necessary warning. It is a call for a wiser, more humble, and more empathetic form of liberalism. It argues that the advocates for progress must listen to and address the legitimate anxieties and the real pain of those who are disrupted by it. If we ignore the backlash, if we dismiss the concerns of those who feel left behind as simple ignorance or prejudice, we do so at our own peril. Because the lesson of history is clear. If the forces of progress do not find a way to bring everyone along, the forces of the backlash can become powerful enough to burn the whole house down. This is a deep inquiry into the very rhythm of our modern world. If you believe that we must understand the patterns of the past to navigate the challenges of the present, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to explore the ideas that can help us make sense of our turbulent times.